So I want to address some of the most common mistakes that I see in a divorce. And this is not a one size fits all situation, but some of these mistakes can kind of fall into different categories. And oftentimes you'll see different emotional mistakes that people make. Let's face it, I mean, divorce is an emotional process. You're going through a traumatic event. And I always try to caution clients, don't make lifetime decisions when you're facing significant emotions. If you're feeling very angry, very sad, or anything like that, try to avoid those decisions. And oftentimes that leads to another mistake is rushing through it. People say, I just want this over. And they are willing to sign something that's going to lead to a lifetime of problems simply because they wanted it over. I could tell you story after story of people that just signed documents trying to get it over with, and it led to months and months and sometimes even years of legal fighting later when they were finally able to do that. So if you're feeling emotional, don't sign any documents. Don't rush through this stuff. It's not something that needs to be decided overnight, so you don't need to sign these papers overnight. All right, now I want to talk about some legal mistakes that I see people make. Now, really, one of the biggest things is people hire the wrong lawyer. They hire someone that's either convenient or cheap. They'll hire a family friend. They'll hire somebody that's just simply close by. They'll hire somebody that practices all different types of areas of law. Now, there are some great attorneys that practice multiple areas of law, but unless you know that they have the experience you need, it's a mistake to put such an important decision into their hands. I often see people make mistakes of simply because you have a good lawyer doesn't mean that they can't make mistakes, and it doesn't mean that they got your situation resolved exactly the way you needed it to be. I see people that will come in and I'll go over their documents and I said, have you read this? And they said, oh, I trust you. And I said, well, that's great, but don't. I'm not saying that you can't trust me, but I can make a mistake. And if we don't have the same terms that we thought we agreed upon, that's on you. My job is to make sure you understand the terms, but your job is to read it. You got to make sure that you understand what you're signing. And if you don't understand it, I expect you to ask questions. It's a two-way street. It's a partnership. I need to make sure I translate what these words mean into English so you can understand it in everyday life. But if you don't get it, I need you to raise those questions. Because as your lawyers, we need to make sure that you know what's going on and that you know exactly what is expected of you when you sign these documents. Let's talk about some common mistakes that I see in parenting plans. I see a lot of times when people just try to rush through it, or they simply use the fill in the blank documents when they know they shouldn't. These fill in the blank documents are great for parents that both want the same thing, that both can reasonably get along, and they know that when they argue, they can come to a reasonable resolution. But if you and your spouse can't agree that the sky is blue and grass is green, you should not be using fill in the blank forms. These forms are designed to cover the majority of things that happen, but some plans need levels of detail that cannot be found within those forms. The other thing that you see is people will just try to win in custody. They need to feel like they themselves won, and they start putting their kids as pawns in this situation. You are not going to win anything when you have that mentality. And in fact, there still won't be a winner, but there will be a loser, and that will be your children, because they will now be looking at relationships completely different than what they have to be seeing. Let me tell you some other mistakes that I see. Posting on social media. I can't tell you how many times people try to post on social media thinking that somehow this is going to help them. Social media is not your therapy room. It is not a safe spot. Some people think, well, if I post it on Facebook and I've blocked my ex, that won't somehow come back to me. The reality is, the internet has a lot more eyes than you realize. People are taking screenshots, they're sharing them, and the things that you post on social media can and likely will hurt your case. In fact, in all the years of doing this, I've never seen somebody post something on social media that somehow helped their case. In fact, almost every time it's going to end up hurting their case, or it's going to start distracting from the issues. I know that you have pain inside of you. Okay? But social media is not the place to exercise that. Write it down in a letter. Share it with somebody that's close to you, but do not put it online, because once you put it out there, you can't take it back. The other things you see are people that are avoiding taking care of themselves. They start going into substance abuse or start getting into other things, and they just are looking for something to mask the pain. They try and jump into a new relationship. They try and do all types of things rather than recognizing this is a time of their life where they're going to be going through bad emotions. One of my mentors told me this law of polarity. It's an important thing for people to understand. You have to have opposites in order for them to happen. You can't have good without bad. You can't have happiness without sorrow. You have to understand that as a human, you have to accept these things. And when you're going through a bad time in your life, the last thing you should do is try and mask it by jumping into something else, such as alcohol, drugs, gambling, a new relationship. Avoid these things at all costs because it's only going to hurt you and not become the person you want to be. I was recently asked what are the most common mistakes that women make during a divorce. Now, I've got to put out a little disclaimer. Not all women do this, and I'm not saying that every woman makes these mistakes, but I will give you some observations that I have seen over the years of doing this. And one thing that is very common in relationships are women will often defer deep financial issues to their spouse. And they will say, you just take care of it. And I don't really need to know that. Now, not every situation is that way, but I do see a lot of women that ignore the money. And then when it comes to a divorce, we say, well, what bank accounts do you have? What do you have? And they say, I don't know. I don't know. That's okay. It's okay to not know in the past. But from here on out, if you're going to be facing a divorce, now is the time to learn. Now is the time to step up and get yourself educated on what you have. And then you have to start thinking about how you're going to live on your own going forward. Another common thing is we allow emotions to dictate our decisions. It is okay for us to be emotional. In fact, women typically embrace their emotions more than men. But what you want to do is tap into that. Recognize that you are feeling emotional. If you're feeling scared, angry, sad, any of the emotions that you're feeling, when you're feeling it, try to assess. Try to assess the feelings you're at. If you're extremely sad or feeling very emotional, that's when you got to put yourself in check and say, okay, I got to put off the decisions until a later date and time so I can give myself time to heal and understand where I'm going. The other thing I see with finances, I often see women neglecting the future. And what I will typically do is say, I understand what you're thinking. You don't think you need the retirement accounts in the future. You don't think you need the pensions in the future. But I will promise you that you in 20 years will be grateful that you got what you were supposed to get. So don't ignore the long term. Don't ignore the short term. Don't allow emotions to make your decisions. Use an attorney that you trust. Let them know where you're at emotionally so they can help guide you through the process and ultimately get you a resolution that's fair. Let's talk about some mistakes that I see men making during a divorce. Some of the most common mistakes that you see with men involve finances. And it's in a couple different ways, actually. A lot of times men think they're smarter and that they can always outwit somebody and that they can hide money and control things. But the reality is, unless you've been planning this for years and years and years, your bank statements are going to tell a story. You're going to be able to see where money comes in, where it goes out, and it can be found. But a lot of times men think that, well, my spouse never found it. She's never going to find it. I don't need to worry about it. And they think that they are smarter than everybody else and that they can control the situation. The reality is you can't. If your spouse wants to find that information, they're going to find it. Don't try and be cute. Don't try and be clever because it's only going to prolong things. And when it is found, it's actually going to be used against you because the court will now take that in consideration in terms of your credibility and veracity when it's making decisions long term that are going to impact you and your family. The other thing that I see men doing is kind of on the opposite side of that financial spectrum, especially when their spouse is the primary breadwinner. There's maybe societal guilt of some kind where they kind of feel like I shouldn't be getting spousal support because I'm a man and I should be able to take care of myself. The reality is you and your spouse created the situation you're in, good, bad, or ugly in terms of finances. You're in the situation together. So if your spouse is the primary breadwinner and you would be entitled to spousal support, then you should accept that. Now, people say, well, I don't need their money. I don't want their money. Here's the thing. If you have your children's college fully funded and you have your retirement fully funded, then you can say, I don't want your money. But until those things are done, you should accept the money, put it into their college, put it into a retirement account, and you'll thank yourself later that you did. This is money that the courts are saying you should get. So do yourself a favor and invest that money wisely rather than just spending it on something foolish. So to avoid making these common mistakes going through divorce, it's important that you have a team of attorneys on your side. Not only that, you got to be open and honest with that team, and then you got to listen to their advice. If you're ready, give Reidy Law Office a call, and we'll be happy to go through these things with you to help you avoid these costly mistakes.